Hi there, this is Bonrek the Orc, and welcome to part 2 of my Making Gold in World of Warcraft presentation. And hopefully we can all be ready for Warlords of Draenor when it's released. So, what about the competition? Now, there's going to be times when you can safely ignore your competition, and other times when you cannot. And if your competition is flooding the auction house with items, then you cannot ignore them. In a case when this happens, you have to abandon your product and find another product, because they will just drive the price down and people are unlikely to see your 2 items in amongst 20 of somebody else's. But keep an eye on them though. You may find that once they've sold everything that they give up because they've found it too expensive because of all the lost deposits through expired auctions, or too much hard work with very little gain. Because remember, the more listings a person has, the more work they are doing, and the more expired auctions they have, the more work they're doing. And because it all takes time to relist those items, and the more money they're losing. If they do give up, and then you can safely start to sell the product again once they've stopped playing silly buggers. If you have several people that, although are not flooding the market individually, but collectively they are, then again you cannot ignore them. And by this I mean, supposing there are 10 or so people selling 2 each, which makes 20 lines that are listed. When this happens, it gives the impression that the market is being flooded, and you want to avoid that. So you have to again abandon your product and find another product. But again, keep an eye on them, because when this happens, you'll often find that they end up undercutting each other like crazy and drive the price down, so that many of them drop out because it's not profitable enough to continue. However, if you only have 1 or 2 competitors that have the sense not to flood the market, then you can safely ignore them. Their impact on your business will be minimal. And that brings us on to the next subject of undercutting. Now, there's going to be times when somebody else undercuts you, and times when you think about undercutting others. But remember, when you undercut, what you actually cut is your profit. Undercutting your competition doesn't hurt them in the slightest, and importantly, it doesn't increase your sales either. The only thing that undercutting impacts is your own profit. I can't stress that enough. If you undercut, then it is you that's losing money, not your competition, but you. And let me explain this a bit more. Just because you have an item listed cheaper than your competition, it doesn't guarantee that your item will sell and theirs will not. Because if you sell your item first, then they will then sell their item and at a higher price. So basically you both sell the same item, just at different times and for different amounts. And it's not the person who sells first that is the richest, but the one who sells for the higher price. You want to be the one with the higher price. Furthermore, just because you have the cheapest item listed, it doesn't mean that you will even sell your item first. And think of that a bit like searching for something on Google. Most of the time when people search for something on Google, they will click on a link on the first page, even if the best link is on a subsequent page. Also, let's say you wanted a new baseball cap, and you search Amazon for baseball cap, and it'll return about 20 or so pages of baseball caps, and the chances are that you'll buy one before you've looked at all 20 pages. And the reason for this is because people buy the first one that they see that they can afford, and then stop looking. And it's like the the old phrase that people say when they're looking for something, it's always in the last place you look. Well, of course it is. Who continues to look for something when they've already found what they're looking for? And everybody likes to believe they're a canny shopper, but the reality is people stop looking once they've found what they're looking for at a price they can afford. And it doesn't matter how cheap somebody else is selling the same item for if the buyer has stopped looking. I remember once when I first started playing WoW, a friend of mine started selling some of the same things as me at a lower price than me. But despite mine being more expensive, I often sold mine first. And once when I opened up the auction window that showed an incoming amount for an item that he was also selling, I took a screen print and emailed him the screen print just to show him the futility of undercutting. And remember also, you have no guarantee that your competition has any idea of the value of what they're selling. If you can be sure that you can get 500 gold for something, and you see somebody else selling one for 100 gold, would you undercut them? If you do, then you're a fool, because you'd be losing over 400 gold. They probably had no idea how much to sell it for, and just put a random price on it, which may be ridiculously low. Don't follow their stupidity. You'll often find that if you put something in auction much higher than your competition, they will often repost the item at closer to your price. Another thing to bear in mind is they may have put those items in the auction cheap so that they can buy up everyone that undercuts them. And I've done this myself. Once when I needed a lot of cloth because I was leathering tailoring at the time, I didn't want to pay an arm and a leg for it, so I took the 2 stacks of cloth that I had and posted them in stacks of 5 to make it look like there was more than there were, and posted it for the maximum price I was willing to pay for them. Sure enough, several people saw the cloth that I had in auction and blindly undercut me with several full stacks, which I then snapped up and cancelled the auctions on the cloth that I had posted. If people are undercutting you, don't worry about them. It's not unusual to find competitors that undercut all the time eventually give up because they're not making enough gold for it to be worthwhile. The upshot of what I'm trying to get across here is never, under any circumstances, undercut your competition. It cuts your profit because you're selling for less, and it drives the price down when they in turn undercut you, and so on, which cuts your profits even more. And the last thing you want is to drive the price down. You want to keep the price as high as possible because you want a seller's market, not a buyer's market. So simply don't do it. But what about price reductions? Should you reduce the price of an item if it doesn't sell straight away? And the simple answer to this is no. And the reason for this being that because an item is cheap doesn't guarantee that it will sell. And there are times when you'll find that you have slow selling items, but don't worry, it could be that just that nobody wants it at the moment. Next week they may want it and they may be willing to pay the high price that you've put on it. You'll often see this with things like mounts. People often think because they're selling a mount that hasn't sold quickly that it's overpriced, when the reality is the price is fine, it's just that nobody wants it at the moment. I said earlier that you shouldn't expect to get rich quick, and if you want to get rich quick, then you shouldn't be watching this. Excuse me, just had a quick drink. Take an example of the Krasari Prowler breeches, which require 28 hardened magnificent hide to make. And a leather worker can only make 1 hardened magnificent hide per day. So this item takes 28 days to make. The Krasari Prowler breeches have an item level of 553, and I've seen similar armour pieces with similar item level sell for as much as 100k on the black market auction house. Now I put the first one that I made in the auction at 75k, whilst other people on my server were trying to sell them for 10 to 15k. Now, whilst they sold theirs quickly, mine took 3 weeks to sell, but it did sell. The important thing to remember here is that if something takes a month to make, then you can only make one a month. So don't be afraid to have it sitting around for a full month. I got a return on my Krasari Prowler breeches in 1 month that it would take my competition 5 to 8 months to match. And it was all because they were too impatient to sell and to make a quick return. So, are there times when you should reduce the price of an item? Well, there's always the possibility that you're listing an item for a price that just will not be realised. But you should ask yourself, did you apply the hourly rate for the item, or did you put a price on it that somebody on the internet said it was worth? Now, if you applied your hourly rate to an item and have listed it every day for a month without selling it, you might as well vendor the item, because it's more likely that nobody wants it than that the price is too high. Because you don't want to get trapped into selling items at a lower price and in the process devaluing your hourly rate. It's much better to vendor the item and abandon it. And what I mean by this is, if you set your hourly rate at say 500 gold and you make a single item from the materials farmed in that hour that you having difficulty selling for more than 250 gold, so you reduce your price to 250 to sell it, then you're more likely to farm materials for it again to sell another one, and again for the low price of 250 gold. Which means instead of working for 500 gold an hour, you're now working for 250 gold an hour. So you've devalued your hourly rate, and you never want to devalue your hourly rate. If on the other hand you loot a rare item that others tell you is worth a lot of gold, and you price it on the value that others have told you it's worth, and then you're unable to sell it after a month, then in a case like that, assume that what others told you it's worth was too high and go ahead and reduce the price. But for items that were priced according to your hourly rate, then don't do it. These items are your bread and butter items, and you don't want to devalue them. If items don't realise the price that you have for them, then just simply vendor them and find a new product. Never sell cheap in auction. As I said before, the auction house is not a place for misers and paupers, so don't try and change that by selling cheap. Now, there's sometimes you'll see people attempting to sell items in trade chat, and they'll link the items and invite you to whisper an offer. Now, there are two types of people that do this. There's greedy people that want to sell something way above its true value, and the desperate people that want to get rid of an item quickly, and you should be neither. You never want to get rid of something quickly, and be prepared to wait for an item to sell. If you want to get rich quick, then you really should stop watching this now. And you never want to be greedy either. You notice how those people spamming trade rarely want to tell you the price of something. That's because they're greedy and want a price that is way above the value of the item. And when you make them a fair offer, they'll often turn it down. And they'll say something like, oh, the auction price is X amount. But what they don't tell you is that they have two, and the one in auction is being sold by their alt, and at an inflated price, in order to get you to buy the one at a slight discount that's still above its true value. Or the one in auction may have been overpriced by somebody taking a random guess. So, and you've probably seen people trying to sell things like this Swift Lovebird in December, which is available to obtain in February. So they're selling it for at least 10 months after they acquired it. And if somebody is holding on to an item for that length of time, it's a clear indication that they're expecting to get a price far higher than people are prepared to pay for it. And so never spam trade chat begging for offers. All that happens is people laugh at you. But you can still advertise in trade chat without begging for offers. For example, if you've just restocked the auction house with glyphs or gems, something like that, you could type into trade chat something like all glyphs now available in auction. Or if you've made or acquired an item that you believe is great for transmogrification, then you might want to advertise that in trade chat. So only use trade chat to announce items you've listed in auction. For example, call transmog and then the item, link the item name, now in auction. But when you advertise, always have the item in the auction house and direct the customers to the auction to buy it. Never try to sell to people directly using trade chat. People that buy in trade chat are looking for bargains, and you're not in the bargain business. Never spam trade chat. Also, never advertise an item more than once per hour. And if you feel that like you need to advertise more than once per hour, then you're working too hard, and you need to examine yourself to find out why you're working too hard. Is it because you're trying to sell garbage? Is it overpriced? Or are you just expecting it to sell faster than necessary, and you should be prepared to wait for an item to sell? So how long should you expect something to take to sell? Well, the truth is it fluctuates and it varies, and you might find that you sell something one a day for a week, and then the following week you only sell one in the whole week, and the week after it might jump up to 2 a day. And sometimes you will have slow sellers, but don't panic. And like I said before, it's not the person who sells first that is the richest, but the one who sells at the higher price. Also, take into consideration how long something takes to acquire. If something takes a month to make, such as the Sky Golem mount, then you don't want to sell it too quickly, because if you do, there will be a time when you don't have one for sale, and not having one for sale is not a good thing. You can't control the price of something if you don't have one for sale, and what this means is you should take it as read that others will undercut you, but don't worry about that. And if you have one in the auction, then they will probably only undercut you by a small amount, because you're showing them the value of the item. But if you don't have one for sale, then they may underestimate the value of the item and sell it for a very small fraction of the true value. And this means that anyone that sees their price will think that that is all it's worth, and are now less likely to pay a reasonable and good price that you've put on something. And if an item takes 4 weeks to make, then you should expect it to take 4 to 8 weeks to sell. Anything less than 4 weeks is too fast, because you cannot replace it that quickly. And the price you should charge for materials such as living steel or Jard's peculiar energy source that you can only make once per day should be equal to about twice your hourly rate. If you're thinking you can't wait 4 weeks for something to sell, then abandon the product completely. Just find something that will sell something cheaper, such as glyphs or armor or something like that. And there will also be times that you'll find that some things will sell really fast, but beware of these times, because it may not be a good thing. Because if you're constantly selling a product faster than you can replace it within your allotted farming time, then you're selling it too cheaply, and you need to increase your price by at least 100%. Yep, double your price. You need to put the brakes on, but be careful it's not just a brief fluctuation. And remember, you shouldn't be pricing your product so that everyone can afford it, only that so that one person can afford it, and that one person being your customer. Imagine that you've set your daily gold to 1,000 gold. Sorry, your daily gold goal at 1,000 gold. Would you rather achieve it by selling 10 items at 100 gold each, or 5 items at 200 gold each? Now, if you think there's no difference in that, because they both end up at 1,000 gold, then you're wrong, because the 5 items can be produced in half the time, thus giving you more free time to do other things. So it's better to sell 5 items at 200 gold than 10 items at 100 gold. You don't want to sell things fast, and the faster you sell things, the faster you have to work. And if you spend more than an hour per day farming for materials, then your price is too low. Okay, so that's the end of part 2, everybody, and I shall get part 3 recorded and uploaded as soon as I can. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.